The first sound that morning wasn't the usual quiet thump of a trash truck rolling down Maple Crest Drive. It was a crash so loud, it rattled my window panes and jolted me straight out of my chair. I ran to the front window, coffee still in hand, and there she was again, Margaret Lewis, Queen Bee of the Homeowners Association, standing in her pressed lavender blouse with her arms crossed like she was leading a parade. My trash can lay on its side in the middle of the street, garbage spilling out like she'd just declared war on me personally. And for some reason this time, something inside me snapped. I'd lived in Maple Crest for 6 years with my wife Laura and our teenage son Ethan. We weren't fancy people, 2-story house, blue shutters. I mowed my own lawn every Saturday. Laura ran the small-town library, and Ethan was forever strumming his guitar in the garage. Life was good, predictable, quiet. Or at least it was, until Margaret decided she was the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood's image. She had an eye sharper than any security camera, always ready to point out whose lawn was too long or whose porch light stayed on past 10. But her obsession with my trash can, that was something else. At first, I told myself it was raccoons. One morning, trash was everywhere. The next week, it happened again, then again. But the day Ethan came inside and said, "Dad, I saw her. She just walked by and kicked it," that illusion shattered. I didn't want to believe it. Who in their right mind wakes up, sips their coffee, and decides the highlight of their morning is booting over their neighbor's trash can? But the following Tuesday, I watched with my own eyes. Margaret marched down the street, clipboard tucked under her arm, and without a word swung her foot into my bin like she was taking a penalty shot. I tried bringing it up at the HOA meeting. I kept my voice calm. "Someone's been knocking over my trash can. I think it's deliberate." Margaret smiled sweetly, didn't blink, and said, "Perhaps you should secure it better. Wild animals roam at night." The room chuckled nervously, but I saw the sideways glances. Everyone knew. Nobody said a word. That night after cleaning spilled coffee grounds off the driveway again, I decided enough was enough. I started looking up ways to keep raccoons and apparently HOA presidents out of trash bins. Weighted lids, bungee cords, locks. But then I thought, why stop at protecting it? Why not make sure if Margaret tried it again, she'd get a surprise she wouldn't forget? It had to be harmless, just enough to teach her to leave it alone. So I built something. Ethan handed me tools like we were in a rocket lab, grinning the whole time while Laura shook her head, muttering, "This is going to backfire." I explained my plan, and even she laughed. By Tuesday morning, my new and improved trash can was out front. Looked normal, nothing unusual, but it wasn't. It had a motion-activated alarm rigged inside. I stood at the window as Margaret came strutting down the road, sunglasses perched clipboard in hand. She didn't even glance around. She lifted her foot, gave my can a kick, and the alarm shrieked like a fire engine in church. Margaret screamed, staggered backward, clutching her foot, face twisted in outrage. 3 dogs barked, 2 kids dropped their basketballs, and my neighbor, Mrs. Kessler, gasped so loud I heard it from across the street. The can stayed perfectly upright, like it was mocking her. I almost laughed myself sick. Ethan whispered, "Dad, it actually worked." Laura just crossed her arms, hiding a smirk. Margaret tried to regain her dignity, straightened her blouse, and marched off. But I caught the look she shot at my house. This wasn't over. By lunchtime, the neighborhood was buzzing. Folks lingered on walks, slowing down near my driveway. "What was in that trash can, Tom?" Mrs. Kessler asked, like I'd hidden a wild boar in there. Old Mr. Hanley muttered. Sounded like she stepped on a snake. I just shrugged. Regular trash. But I knew, and so did they, Margaret had been exposed. The very next day, a notice appeared in my mailbox. Emergency HOA meeting. Margaret wasn't going to let it go. That night, the clubhouse was packed. Margaret sat front and center, a bandage on her foot, like she'd been mauled by a bear. She gripped the microphone, cleared her throat, and announced, "Neighbors, I was assaulted yesterday by a dangerous device disguised as a trash can." Gasps rippled. She even held up a photo someone had snapped her hopping backward mid-scream. I wouldn't put it past her to have staged it. I raised my hand. With all due respect, Margaret, it was on my property and it wasn't dangerous. Just secure. She snapped back, "Secure." It screamed at me. The room erupted in laughter. I explained calmly it was a motion alarm meant to scare raccoons. Even Laura chuckled behind her hand. For the first time, people sided with me. Margaret's face turned purple. She adjourned with no action, but swore she'd review policies. I knew better. The weeks after were chaos. Flyers on doors claiming unsafe homemade devices were threatening the community. Bright yellow papers warning about neighbors endangering lives. Everyone knew who she meant. Someone even drew a cartoon of Margaret being chased by a trash can with teeth. She grew quieter, more controlled, but the look in her eyes told me she was plotting. Then the police showed up, 2 cruisers in front of my house, lights flashing, kids staring, neighbors gathering like it was a parade. "Sir, we received a call about a hazardous device." Margaret stepped forward, voice dripping with triumph. "That's right, officers. He built a contraption. It screams it could cause a heart attack." The officers inspected, found nothing but regular garbage and a $50 alarm. "Ma'am, this isn't illegal. It's not a police matter." The crowd laughed, clapped even. Margaret stood red-faced as the cruisers drove away. Not long after, private security arrived in a black SUV claiming they'd received a complaint. Same story, harmless alarm. They left shaking their heads. Margaret's fury only grew. Then came the fence. Overnight, she hired workers to erect a monstrous 12-foot wall of metal panels around her yard. It looked like a military base dropped in our suburb, and on top, cameras pointed directly at my house. One morning, she even called out "Smile" for the camera neighbor. Laura muttered, "This is harassment." Ethan started filming everything, saying, "Dad, this is gold." So I retaliated, rolled out a giant sign in my yard. "Smile, Margaret, you're on camera too." Mounted my own camera pointed straight at her fortress. The neighborhood lost it. People stopped cars to laugh. Mrs. Kessler nearly spilled her coffee. Even Mr. Hanley cracked a grin. Margaret went berserk. Soon Beethoven was blasting at 7 a.m. from speakers on her porch. Then one morning I heard my own voice booming. "Ethan, clean the garage before I lose my mind." Somehow she'd recorded me and was broadcasting it like breaking news. I marched over, demanded she turn it off. She sipped her coffee and said, "Public audio, nothing illegal." That's when I knew she didn't just want to win, she wanted to break me. So I fought back with Ethan's drone. One Saturday it rose into the sky carrying a speaker blaring, "Hit the road, Jack." Neighbors doubled over laughing. Margaret swung a broom, missed, then blasted it with her hose. The drone crashed into her fence, knocking a panel loose. A gust of wind toppled half the wall onto her precious rose garden. Petals scattered like confetti. She screamed so loud, birds scattered from 3 trees. At the next HOA meeting, the tide turned. Mrs. Kessler stood voice firm. "This isn't about safety, Margaret. It's about you losing control." Neighbors clapped, cheered, voices rising. A vote of no confidence was called. Margaret lost by a landslide. She stormed out, clipboard shaking in her hand, vowing revenge. But the next week, a "for sale" sign appeared in her yard. The street exhaled in relief. We thought it was over. Then the Parkers moved in. Julia and Daniel polished smiling muffins for everyone. Within 2 weeks, Julia was elected HOA president. At first, she seemed reasonable, but soon little letters appeared. Trash cans must be in by 5 lawns, trimmed weekly basketball hoops stored away. It was Margaret's rules with a prettier face. Before long, they pushed a beautification project, mandatory repainting of every house fines for non-compliance. The neighborhood split. Half were charmed, half furious. I stood in a packed meeting and said, "This isn't progress. Karen knocked over trash cans. You're knocking over freedom." Cheers erupted. The Parkers' proposal failed by 4 votes, but they weren't done. They installed cameras, blasted patriotic marches at dawn, doubled down with charm and rules. So the neighborhood fought back, filed code complaints. One morning, 3 white city trucks rolled in code enforcement inspectors, hopping out with clipboards. They measured fences, photographed cameras, cited violations. Julia's perfect smile cracked for the first time. Days later, a vote removed the Parkers from power. Their cameras, speakers, and wall fragments came down. They packed up, left without waving. We thought we'd finally won. For a week, Maple Crest was peaceful. Then a silver sedan pulled into the Parkers' old driveway. Out stepped a woman in a hot pink tracksuit, with Queen bedazzled across the back, sunglasses bigger than her face. Behind her, a man with 2 poodles in sweaters, 3 teenagers glued to their phones. My coffee nearly slipped from my hand. Laura whispered, "No," because I recognized her. Margaret was back, and this time she'd brought reinforcements. By noon, she was marching her yard like a general barking orders. Trash cans, their poodles need a fenced area, kids find the Wi-Fi password. Richard, unload the folding chairs, we've got meetings to plan. At 6 o'clock sharp, a flyer hit every door. Exciting new era for Maple Crest mandatory gathering tonight. The clubhouse filled with groans and eye rolls. Margaret stood in a glittery blazer, poodles at her feet. Sunglasses still on indoors. "Neighbors," she said grandly. "Did you miss me?" Nobody answered. Mrs. Kessler muttered, "Like a root canal." Margaret beamed anyway, announced 30 pages of new rules, trash can schedules, lawn inspections, curfews. Halfway through, Mrs. Kessler stood up, tossed the packet on the floor, and said, "Not again." The room clapped. Margaret froze, eyes flashing. And that's where I'll leave it, because if I've learned anything, it's that peace in Maple Crest is always temporary. These wars don't end, they just change generals. One day it's a woman kicking trash cans, the next, it's polished dictators with muffins, and sometimes it's both coming back with poodles in tow. So what do you think, was I right to fight back the way I did? Or should I have just ignored it and kept picking up my trash week after week? Have you ever had a neighbor or an HOA cross the line like this? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this story if it hits home, and let's talk about where you draw the line between rules and harassment. Because in neighborhoods like mine, that line is always moving.